Harry, thanks very much for doing this. It's a great opportunity and a thrill to get you talking about hockey. Um, Obviously, when you think about something like this, you think about Ace, Bill Spear, Ron Murphy, Gary Doak, Frosty Forrestal, and everybody who can't be with us now to celebrate this. But the thing that boils in my head about this is that the legacy of this team is all out offense and breaking of records. But when you coached them, there were a lot of tie games and emphasis on defense, and you were doing it without Teddy Green, and Rick Smith was only 21, and Bobby Orr was starting to run up and down the ice. And I'm just wondering, how did you make all that work and forging the identity of the club with that kind of discipline?
Well, like most teams that have some success in that area, we had two excellent goaltenders in Cheevers and Eddie Johnson. So usually goals against or defense, when they talk about teams, has a great deal to do with what type of goaltending you had. And we had very good goalkeeping. Besides that, even though certain players really made a mark for themselves in hockey with their offense, they were strong defensive players. I mean, Phil Esposito, in crucial times over all the years I coached Phil, was a guy I relied on defensively as well. And he could kill penalties as well as anyone. And he was excellent face-off man. So, sometimes his offense was so great that no one cared about his defense. It was probably true, but it was good too, along with others. I mean, if we had a face-off deep in our end and we were up a goal, I mean, I wouldn't want anybody else on the ice but Johnny Busick, who was just unbelievably inept at getting the puck out of our end, especially when they maybe have had their goaltender out or something like that. He was excellent defensive forward in that situation. So, we looked at those players as offensive players, but, as a coach, I remember them meaning so much to me defensively as well.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take our next question from Joe McDonald. Joe, go ahead.
Hi, Harry. I hope you're well. Thanks for doing this. Good to talk hockey with you. You've been with the organization for more than 50 years in all different capacities. Just looking back on your time with the Bruins, just how you just would describe your career?
The only word I could think of is wonderful. It started when Bobby joined the team, followed by Phil and Hodge and Stanfield, and it created a nucleus of a future great team. And it's been going on ever since. And I used to live in fear that we might lose the attitude or the personality of that group of players. But then along came Terry O'Reilly and Cam Neely and the other great players in the following years. So, we did have a couple of tough years. We ended last one year. But mostly we were a contender. And every year I can remember of the 50 years we're talking about was a thrill to me. Obviously, if you don't win 50 Stanley Cups and only win 49, you're disappointed. But so we didn't win enough cups, but we were a tremendous contending team with the players we got through the years. They say I used to kind of live in fear that the personality of that 1970 team and the attitude of the 1970 team and the style of the 1970 team would go away once we lost some of the players, but that didn't happen. It carried over, and we had many teams that played with the same spirit and the same idea as that team.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take our next question from Dave Stubbs. Dave, go ahead. Your line's open.
Harry, greetings from Montreal. In the late 1970s, Scotty Bowman had let's call him a cast of characters, and Larry Robinson has said that this team practiced guilty many days. I would suggest that maybe the late 1970s Canadians were choir boys compared to your team of 1970. Was there ever any point when, as coach of that team, these guys turned up for practice and you kind of rolled your eyes and said, I don't know what I'm going to get out of them today? What was it like coaching a cast of characters as wild and crazy as those guys were?
Well, the way you described, I felt every Monday morning throughout the season. And we did have a host of characters, but they were able to separate that from the business at hand. And our Monday practices were brutal. They know it was going to be brutal. They knew it was going to be beautiful, And they were receptive. John McKenzie was the character of most of them. He'd lie on his back towards the end of practice and put his feet and hands in the air and start acting like a toddler in a tantrum. Just say, I've had enough. But it was kind of a ritual for the team to know what was coming the following week. We used to play on Saturdays, mostly on the road. And then by the time Monday came around, we had to have tough practices, and we did. And they were good at it. They were good at practice. They were a good, hard-working practice team. It's very difficult for me to remember players on that team dogging it or cheating on the ice during games or in practice or anywhere else.
Our next question will come from Dan Roach. Dan, go ahead.
Hey, Harry. Hope you're doing well. Just a thought on with the 50th anniversary that we're going to see the Bobby Orr goal and maybe more so the Bobby Orr photo of that goal. When you, even now, 50 years later, look at that photo, what kind of thoughts go through your mind?
Well, fortunately, because I had a good look at it, and I can actually recall it any moment, anytime I want. So I've looked at it a million times since then in my head. But to tell you the truth, what I was worried about was not so much what great plays Derek and Bobby were going to make, but who was going to cover up for Bobby when he went in, because our team was very aware of what kind of a player we had in Bobby Orr, and that for him to be at his absolute greatest, we had to be aware of what he might do offensively as a defenseman. And they all were. And my eyes turned to Westfall, who was the right winger at the time that Bobby scored. And he was the man responsible for covering up for him on the point. And as soon as I saw Bobby go in and leave the point, I looked to see where Eddie was, and he was coming right over to cover for Bobby. So, it kind of comforted me as a coach. I didn't know Bobby was going to score, but I was happy to see Eddie coming over in case he didn't. And the next thing you know, we're all out the ice and hell broke loose.
Our next question will come from Fluto Shinzawa. Fluto, go ahead.
Hi, Harry. You had some younger players in 1970 from Derek, Wayne Cashman, and certainly Bobby. But I'm wondering what it was like for you to coach Johnny Busick at that time, at that point of his career. He had been with you for some tough years before that. But what did you have him do that year? What was he good at? And how did it make you feel when he got a chance to win at that point?
Well, I'll tell you, Johnny Busick is a Bruins story in it upon himself. He really is. He's still with the organization. And when I arrived there as a coach, I felt the success of the team wasn't very much at the time, and we might be better off to begin again to select a captain. And Busick was a captain at the time, and I took the role of captain, not away from John Busick, but away from the team, and made 3 assistant captains. That hurt John an awful lot. He's a very proud guy, and pays a great deal of attention to making sure that he does everything right in the public eye and in his teammates' eye. He's been that way all his life, so it bothered him all those years. I'm sure it did. But he was such a good player for us. He actually, I think most of you might agree that he was one of the 3 great left wingers of his era, with Bobby Hull and maybe Frank Mahovlich ahead of him a little bit, but not by much. And we, as I said earlier, I depended so much on him to be on the ice in crucial faceoffs in our end, especially with the other team's goalie out and us with the 1-goal lead. If we could win the draw and get it to Busick, it was almost 100% certainty that we would get it out. And so he's absolutely invaluable there. As a goal scorer, he was what we call a short range goalie, the goal scorer. Maybe a little once in a while mid range, but mostly short range. And he knew how to stop at the edge of the crease and take the pass and score it like no one that I knew before him, and really no one since. I see Marchand do it today in much the same manner, but John Busick remains as the guy that could really do that, and he got well over 500 goals. I mean, he was one of the sensational left wingers of his time.
Thanks, Harry. Just a reminder to media, if you no longer have a question, please put your hand back down. With that, we'll take our next question from Kevin Dupont. Kevin, go ahead.
Harry, we talk all the time about how the game has changed over the last 30, 40, 50 years. Coaching is one of those aspects. It's, your era, you didn't have 2 and 3 assistant coaches behind the bench. So here you are with a team with the best player in the game, loaded on offense. Those teams don't always win. So what was the trick to managing that in that era when it's pretty much just you back there?
Kevin, I'll try to explain how I felt. Whether it was a trick or not, I don't think so. But one of the things I used to say to the players on occasion was, look, you guys are stuck with me for this year. And damn it, you're going to do what I want you to do or ask you to do. And if it's no good, there'll be someone else coming in here to tell you what to do. And I hope you do what they tell you what to do. But for now, I'm the guy telling you what to do, and hopefully we can do together what will make us a good team. And I said that to the team many times, especially when, it didn't look like we had a solution to our problems. We were in a losing streak or something like that. And they had to listen to me. And maybe they didn't want to, and maybe they shouldn't have had to. But the fact was they did have to. And I said, I guess what I was saying to them is, you can't get out of this problem. I'm calling the shots. And they're all wrong, or they're all right, or they're half wrong and right. But for now, you're going to have to listen to me and do what I ask you to do, and hopefully do what I ask you to do. And I didn't get a lot of feedback about that, but players, you have to sit in the locker room to know the sense how they feel. They may think that's okay, or maybe it's not okay. And afterwards, when they're having a beer together, they say, "Did you hear what he said?" Or somebody else will say, "Oh no, that was right. What he said was right." So, you do the best you can to bring the team together, and that's what I was trying to do. Fortunately, we had so many good players that it was a lot easier than some coaches.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take our next question from the Honorable Mike Loftus. Mike, go ahead.
Hello, Harry. Nice to talk to you.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, I was looking back at it. Your first year, the 66-67 season, obviously, you got Bobby in, but it was a difficult year, and then there's an expansion draft, and you make trades. How much of a challenge was it to deal with all of that roster turnover? And what was the key to making everybody, such a new team work together kind of quickly?
Well, the problem was not working with the roster turnover. The problem was dealing with the roster at the beginning. And the Bruins had, I think, finished in sixth place in the 16 division for a number of years in a row. And then finally, the year before I was named coach, got from sixth to fifth. And I promptly was the coach that took them back to sixth. And I kind of assessed the team in my own mind, and I didn't know much about the National Hockey League because we didn't, technology wasn't good enough for me to see games. And I was out coaching their minor league teams all over the place. And I wasn't sure really what approach to take to these major league players. But anyways, when that happened, they made this trade, and I think all of you know, you're also veteran sports writers and sports people, the players make teams, and they made a trade for Esposito, Hodge, and Freddie Stanfield that gave us two solid lines. And Sanderson broke into the league as one of the great rookies ever to break into this league, believe me. And Cheevers came back, was sent to the minors and came back. And now we had a team. And I think it was time for some identity to be established, an attitude to be established, a personality to be established. And those players, they did that. They did it. So, to answer your question, I think, most everything goes to the players. All you do is try to hold it together so it doesn't fall apart if you start losing, or if you got a bad actor on a team, which to be honest with you, we seldom ever had. Seldom in all the years I've been there. I had one or two, and I won't mention who they are, but we really did not. And so, just like this year's team, it's just a great team attitude that has been passed on from that 1970 team to the 2020 team, I think.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take our next question from Matt Porter. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, Harry. That actually comment flows in nicely with what I was going to ask you, which is, as the Bruins try to keep the group that they've had for the last decade or so, and longer in some cases, with Bergeron and Krejci and Chara, what do you make of their transition kind of period now, and how they kind of continue this run that they're on? What do you think will be the key for them? And if you were calling the shots, how would you play it as these guys get older?
Well, I think I would call it whatever way Don Sweeney's going to call it. I'm telling you, and Bruce Cassidy and Cam Neely. I mean, you know, they came in here with a few problems. Don Sweeney's first draft, he had never seen any of the players play. He spent all his time in Providence. Had nothing to do with the 3 drafts we had in the first round. Had never really seen them play at all. And so I had to live with who they are. And we come out of it pretty good, but we've done better since. And I just think that, you know, what the teams and what the players establish as an example, maybe, for the way you have to behave and the way you have to play is probably a better word in Boston, has never gone away. And the fans won't let it go away. You guys certainly won't let it go away. And they bought into it big time. And it has a lot to do with Cam and Don and Bruce. So, again, like I feared for so many years that we'd lose that somehow, lose that kind of be a Bruins type of thing, which may be just something that's kind of in my mind. But, you know, we had a couple of players who were really good players. We got them in drafts or trades and really good goal scorers, but I never thought of them as Bruins, and I couldn't. And, but as long as we can keep that alive, we're going to be challenging the Stanley Cup forever.
Thanks, Harry. Just a reminder to media, if you no longer have a question, please put your hand back down. I am happy to call on you if you do have another question. We do have time for a few more. We'll take our next one from Mike Petralia. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Travis. Harry, thanks so much for doing this. A real treat, honor to be speaking with you. I wanted to ask you about what it is about guys like Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, players with Bruins heritage that makes them such good, makes them so good in the transition from playing the game to seeing the game from up in the press box.
You know, that's a really good question, because a lot of people wonder about certain players, whether they could make a good coach, a good executive, or something like that. And no one seems to have the answer, and just takes a flyer, and some work and some don't. But no one that I dealt with in all my years was so in love with the game of hockey as Cam Neely. He took a terrific blow to one of the spectacular careers that could have been and was, and took a few years off and just could not stay away from it. And I knew that, and we always had a good relationship. We fought a lot, certainly not on the ice, because you wouldn't be talking to me today if I would. But we fought a lot over certain things. But he wanted to be back in the game, and he wanted to do what he always wanted to do, was be involved in hockey. So it's hard to find a guy like that. And it really is. I mean, they want the job, and there's good money in the job, and there's prestige, and there's public idolism, really, and they take it for that reason. I know Cam because I brought him aboard as Mr. Jacobs wanted him on board. I said he's the best figure in the city right now in terms of sports. He's so charity minded, and he does everything, and he's a great player, and we got to get him back in the organization. And finally we did, and we didn't know what to what title to give him. I said, you can't give him some title like, head of Northwest Scouting or some stupid thing. He's the vice president of the team, and we got to teach him the business, and he'll learn in a hurry, which he did. And he was, to me, he's one of the things that I feel proud of. First of all, the trade worked out good, but those trades are always lucky or not lucky. So it worked out really good, and Cam was terrific, Hall of Fame player. But his presence in the city has been spectacular, and so I was glad to see him end up with our team and doing the job he is.
Joe McDonald, we'll take another question from you.
Harry, you mentioned Bruce Cassidy a little while ago. I'm wondering, what have you thought of the job that he's done as head coach, and where would you rank him as far as coaches in the Bruins history of the Bruins organization?
His job in Providence, that he was doing in Providence, was never unnoticed by Don and Cam, and certainly not by me. I thought that we had a gem here. His relationship with players is I wouldn't say it's unique because there's so many coaches gone through this history, but it's what you want. It's I'm in charge, but I'll help you out. I'll make you a better player. But just always remember that I'm in charge of this business this year. And he knows what he's doing. He was an excellent player, drafted early in the draft and suffered a serious knee injury that actually ended his career. And so, if you're on the outside looking in, you can just read what he tells you guys and the statements he gives you people and how he answers your question, that he makes you feel like he's treating you properly, I think. And I think he treats the players, I know he treats the players the same way. They think he's treating them properly. And that's a big step in coaching a team. So he knows the game. He knows how to play. So I can't say enough about him. You got to remember what he came in here. We were out of the playoffs. We weren't out mathematically, but we were heading out. We were definitely heading out when he came aboard. We ended up making them. And I think he's had one of the best records of any coach in the league since he took, I'm not sure of this, since he took over the Bruins. And he didn't take over a Gretzky-led Bobby Orr type team. He did not. And I'll tell you, his record is not to be reckoned with, really. It's pretty damn good.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take another question from Dave Stubbs. Dave, go ahead.
Harry, how did your work with the Bruins in the 1960s to the 1970 championship prepare you to coach 1972 Team Canada in the Summit Series? And can you compare or contrast what it was like to win the 70 Cup to winning the 72 Summit Series with Team Canada?
First of all, I'll answer that question first. I think they were very similar, except the climax, the 72 came last. It came first with our defeat of the Rangers and the Blackhawks. And the climax to the 72 series came on the last game in the last 34 seconds. So other than that, the experience and the travel, the road to those championships or those victories were very, very similar. We were not great favorites to beat the Rangers in 1970 or the Blackhawks. We were a little bit better favorites to beat the Rangers, but not to beat the Blackhawks, but not the Rangers. In 1972, I think we were overwhelming favorites to beat the Russians until we played them. And then all bets were off, as you all know. So they were two absolutely highlighting episodes in my life, mainly because of drama involved. The 72 series was kind of separated because of the geopolitical, really, ramifications of the thing. And it spilled over, of course, to the team, and it was everywhere on the team when we were at home in Canada or when we were in Moscow. I mean, it was the political connotations, as I say, I think they were playing a part in the series. But anyway, that was a great, great victory for that team. But no more great victory for me than the 1970 Bruins, who, I know it was 29 years since they won it, but to me it was like 3 years since they won it, 3 or 4 years, because it just felt like when I saw Bobby Orr on the ice for the first time, I said, we're on our way. So it took 4 years.
We'll take our next question from Mick Colagio. Mick, go ahead.
Harry, just to kind of put a bookend on that Johnny Busick story, he did get back his C in the 1973-74 season, which was nice to see. As general manager, you brought back Gary Doak, then Jerry Cheevers, then Rick Smith. Each deal obviously had its own context, but at some level, were you trying to put the band back together to fortify their culture that you've been talking about?
I have to admit there's some of that more than analytical study of the players, which is very prevalent today. There was more of that involved. I mean, Gary Doak was an unbelievably popular player and a player he reminded me of Gregory Campbell, who played for us in the 2011 Stanley Cup. He really would sacrifice himself to win a hockey game. So to bring back those players who I guess we felt were Bruins, I don't know. When you look back in hindsight, you say, oh, this is what I thought was. I'm not sure what I thought at the time. I'm not sure. I have advised, and I have myself thought that I have advised general managers that have come along and coaches that have come along. If you can do something to help your team, and it's going to, in your mind, it's going to help the team, how can you not do it? So in other words, if you don't do it, you're saying you don't want to help your team. So you make these trades because you're certain it's going to help the team, and it turns out it doesn't. You shouldn't be the manager if you won't do those things, because what's the point of you being running the team and saying, I can make a deal that will really help us, and then not do it? So I kind of tried to live by that adage, but who knows, I probably swayed too.
Thanks, Harry. We'll take our next question from Mike Loftus. Mike, go ahead.
Hey, Harry, just quickly again, for those of us who were maybe like 11 years old on Mother's Day 1970, and you're going into overtime, and you don't start Phil Esposito's line or Fred Stanfield's. What made you pick Derek's line to start that overtime?
Well, I got to tell you, it was not a guess. I did it for two reasons. The first reason, I thought that if they were going to have any chance, it would be early. The longer the overtime period, this is my thinking. That doesn't mean it's true. Now, you got to remember, when people say things, they don't mean it, they're certain. But I thought the longer the overtime period would go, the less chance we would have of scoring the goal. And so I thought that if the over and under, Tom Johnson and I, my assistant, we had a ongoing bet that the over and under for overtime was 5 minutes. And we had this bet. And I thought about the bet, and I said, I think it's true. That if the goal's going to be scored, it's going to be scored in the first 5 minutes. But I was guarding against them scoring it in the first 5 minutes, not us. And it was on my mind. And I thought, I'm not going to let them score in the first 5 minutes, because the longer this goes, the better chance we might have. And sure enough, we got one in a few seconds. But that's why I did it. I did it out of, I did it because I thought I should do it. I mean, I could have bailed out on it with Phil and hoped he'd get the goal in the first 30 seconds, which he very well could have, or Bobby. Bobby started, of course. I wouldn't make that mistake. But I thought that's the reason I did that. And Phil wanted to start. He wanted to start badly. He was upset, and he didn't complain in the locker room or anything. But he wanted to start because he wanted to score the goal that gave us the Stanley Cup for the city and for the team, and so did probably everybody else. But I felt that our best chance was to have our best checking line out there, and go with the under 5 minute thing. That if we can stop them in the first 5 minutes, we'll probably win.
We've got time for two more, so we'll take the penultimate question from Mike Petralia. Mike, go ahead.
Harry, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious what you think of today's team as it compares to teams of the 70s and 80s. We hear so much about the style of game changing over the last several decades, but what do you think of the way these Bruins play today?
Very, very comparable, and every bit as good. There's a couple of things that, in my mind, this isn't gospel. It's just in my mind that determine two good teams, one from another, and it's the way one team checks and the way the other team checks. This Bruins team is one of the best checking teams we've had all the way along. It really is. I mean, in the league right now, there's teams like maybe Las Vegas that check the way we do. Perhaps Columbus and a couple others. But we have that checking ability that allows us to make sure our third and fourth lines are very important members of our team. And, if you have to rely, and you can't, on your third and fourth lines, you're probably not going to do very well. So because our coach has been able to convince our team that of all the skills, shooting, scoring, stick handling, skating, checking is every bit as important. He's been able to convince them of that. So we end up with my observations anyway. The third and fourth lines being very, very important because they complete the skill cycle, as I just recited it, and that's what a lot of our teams used to do. You know, we used to score a lot of goals back in the years we're talking about, but we always had one of the best goals against averages too, and so it's important. It's important, and in today's game, it's particularly important. That's why I do like this team. I liked it last year an awful lot. I liked it the year before, and the reason I like it is because the load that the team carries in the checking game is carried by the third and fourth lines just as well as it is by the so-called first and second lines.
Thanks, Harry. We'll wrap up today's call with a question from Kevin Dupont. Kevin, go ahead.
Harry, the decision going back again to go with the Sanderson line. Did you know that they would go with Berenson, or was that part of the hunch?
No, I don't think it was. I don't think I really took that into account. At least I can't remember doing it. I probably should have, but I didn't. I just felt that I didn't, we were so excited to be one goal away from winning a Stanley Cup. I was nervous that we would be a little over anxious to score that goal, and in great lines like Esposito's line, Stanfield's line, if there's a fault to them, they once in a while get overexcited and take chances and take risks. I think that was going on with me at the time, and I would prefer a line that was going to make sure or try and make sure the other team didn't score. I know that's what I wanted to do. I knew that. I wanted to play a line that made sure they didn't score, because the longer the game went, I thought the better chance we had.